Hello and welcome. So today I'm going to address a favorite topic. I have not done an illusion show since 1998. That was the last illusion show I did, and I used to love illusion shows. When I got into magic, when I seriously got into magic, I wanted to do a full evening show. I wanted to do the big show, the illusion show. And that's what my goal was. That's what I worked toward. I did the birthday party shows. I did the blue and gold dinners. I did all of that. But gradually, I kept adding one illusion after the other to build up my show. I started performing in some nice venues, some not so nice venues. But I was always looking for a full stage and an opportunity to put on the big show. That's what I wanted to do. As my show got bigger, I needed to start renting a truck. It got heavier. It got more laborious. I added lights to it. But the illusion show is something that was in my heart for most of my life. It wasn't until Jill left the show in 1998 that I really started looking at other types of magic to get involved in. That's when I settled on mentalism, and I've been doing mentalism ever since. I don't really regret it. I mean, there are things about mentalism that I never would have known had I not taken that turn and got in and studied mentalism. I think the plots in mentalism are so rich and so full, and the fact that the audience is either directly participating or they're actually accomplishing the magic, or they're involved in some way in which the mentalist is reading their mind. So it's very intimate. And so I really like mentalism, and I don't think I'm going to be going back. But a regular viewer asked a question down below. And folks, if you know me, you know I love your comments. You know I love your suggestions. It takes me a while. When I shoot these videos, I might shoot 3, 4, as many as 6 videos in a sitting, and then try to get those out. When someone makes a suggestion, I try to address it as soon as possible, but there's a little bit of a delay. A number of people have made suggestions. I'm trying to get to those. And so when you make a suggestion, it might be a few weeks before I can get the video out, but I guarantee you, I'm going to hear you. I'm going to get the video out. So this particular video is for Douglas. Douglas asked the question. I'm just going to read the question. Douglas asked, what are the best books on big illusions and box tricks? Those were his terms. What are the best books on big illusions and box tricks? You know, I haven't heard this term in a long time. But back in the day when I was doing a grand illusion show, magicians would ask me, do you have a box jumper? And what they meant by a box jumper was an assistant. Well, I was really inspired as I developed as an illusionist. I was inspired by the Pendragons. And the Pendragons had a relationship of equality. And it's one of the things I really loved about them. It wasn't Jonathan Pendragon an assistant, or Charlotte Pendragon an assistant. It was the Pendragons. And I really like that. And you can't really, I know that later in their lives they separated and they were trying to cultivate separate careers. I think that the combination of Charlotte and Jonathan were greater than the sum of their parts. What they brought to each other and what they brought to the theater was so significant and so creative. And Charlotte had so much skill and Jonathan had so much skill. And when you put these two together, you got something incredibly dynamic. And so I was inspired by them, and I wanted a partnership on stage. And so I never referred to Jill as a box jumper. But I digress there a little bit because what do you call it? You know, what is the official term? I use the term grand illusion, and that term has been ascribed to Jonathan Pendragon. And I don't know that he actually came up with it, but it's what I prefer. What I mean by grand illusion is the big box trick. What David Copperfield specialized in, what Doug Henning specialized in. It's thrilling to do. It's thrilling to perform. I hope that in some way, if you are starting out, or if you're trying to make a decision about which branch of magic are you going to specialize in, I would love to be the one who inspires you to take a look at grand illusion as a viable option. Here's the way I see recent history. Prior to Doug Henning, you had people like George Gobel. Now, George Gobel had a national, even international reputation, but he was local to Baltimore. So I saw George Gobel when I was a Cub Scout. My father was a magician. My father loved magic, and my father brought George Gobel in, and he did a Cub Scout show. Now, Cub Scout show was not grand illusion, but it was platform. I remember him doing the vanishing bowl of water. I remember him doing the razor blade trick, where he swallowed razor blades and pulled them out. I remember him doing the hip hop rabbits. So it was a platform show. But later, when I was 11 years old, my father took me to see him do his full evening show that included the Ajra levitation, the crystal casket, the mummy illusion, many, many other illusions that he did. And I remember seeing him do that, and I was in awe. And at 11 years old, I saw George Gobel, and I said, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I really sincerely made that decision. I remember George was trying to raise some money in what we now call back of the room sales. At 11 years old, I didn't realize it was back of the room sales. But he had a magic book for sale, and I bought the magic book, and I was convinced that this magic book was going to teach me everything I needed to know about becoming what I wanted to be, which was a grand illusionist. I brought it home and read it from cover to cover, and it didn't have any of the tricks that George did. None of them were in the book. I was gravely disappointed. I remember learning to make a quarter cry by squeezing a wet sponge behind it. I remember seeing my fingers float by doing this and focusing in front. I learned that kind of stuff from the book he sold in the back of the room that day. But it didn't discourage me. I wanted to become a grand illusionist. And then this young man hit the scene by the name of Doug Henning. Doug Henning. Now here's the thing. You go back to George Gobel's time. George Gobel ran a costume shop in Baltimore. That's what he did for a living. His pursuit of grand illusion was his passion, but he wasn't profitable as a grand illusionist. And after the golden age, after the decline of and the retirement of Blackstone Sr., there was a problem with grand illusion. It just wasn't happening. Magicians were doing club dates. You had people doing the linking rings and the cups and balls. You had Di Vernon very heavily working. But you had a bit of a downturn when it came to grand illusion up to Doug Henning. Doug Henning produced a show on Broadway called The Magic Show, and it became a sensation. And then he got a number of television specials that came out of that. And that I never saw The Magic Show. I saw it on video, but I never saw it live. But I did see Doug Henning's television specials. From the time I was an early teen on through, I saw Doug Henning do the linking rings. First time I ever saw the linking rings, I saw Doug do it. I saw Doug do the water levitation. I saw Doug do the water torture cell escape. I saw Doug do the Houdini metamorphosis illusion. So Doug was a huge influence on me. And then coming up in the shadow of Doug Henning was another very young illusionist by the name of David Copperfield. And David Copperfield made a jet disappear. And then David Copperfield made a train car disappear. And then David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear. And then David Copperfield flew. Every other magician up to that time had been levitating their partner. Beautiful gown, and the partner floats in the air, and it was gorgeous. And then David Copperfield comes along, and he flies on air. David Copperfield walked through the wall of China. And David Copperfield is still performing today. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if you're a magic historian 100 years from now, you're going to look back on this period, and this period beginning with Doug Henning and going through really to the present time, you're going to look back on this period and say that was the second golden age. And Doug Henning and David Copperfield were really at the forefront of it. And David Copperfield, I think, it's a little bit like Cal Ripken's record with the Baltimore Orioles. I don't think Cal Ripken's record will ever be broken, and it probably will at some point. But I think it's going to be a long-standing record. And I'm not sure that David Copperfield's success, and by success I mean it in the broadest possible terms, his success as an entertainer, his success as a grand illusionist, his success monetarily speaking, I'm not sure that his success, creatively speaking, will ever be matched. It probably will. I hope it will. But I think it's going to stand a long, long time. As we look back in history, when we see Houdini and we see Blackstone and we see Thurston and we say these were greats, we're going to say the same of Doug Henning and of David Copperfield. These were greats. They're greats. And we remember the theatrical aspect. We remember the grand illusion. I think it is the highest aspiration in magic to want to be a grand illusionist. And Douglas, I hope that you're asking the question because you aspire to that greatness. You can do it. You can do it. And I hope that you do. Now let me try to address your question. Douglas, before I address the question, you can see I have lots of books to show you. But before I get into the books, let me give you some of my experience in producing an illusion show. First of all, you need a team. And I suggest a team, not just a partner, because you're going to really want someone to work your sound and lights and maybe even your curtain, someone maybe to help you strike your sets. So you really need a team. Now you can get away with using just one partner, so it's two of you. Ideally there should be three, because you do need somebody to be paying attention to your sound, paying attention to your music cues, maybe paying attention to curtain calls if you're going to work with a curtain. I very rarely worked a curtain appropriately. I just didn't have enough manpower, or human power, to do that. So many times it was Jill and I and that was it, or it was Jill and I and my wife and that was it. So I didn't have that opportunity. But you really need to think in terms of, how am I going to recruit and motivate a team? Denny Haney was able to pay a salary. He was that successful, and that's great. Starting out, you will not be able to do that. It'll be maybe a very long time before you can pay a salary. So you think about, where can I recruit my team? Who can I recruit? And not everybody's going to work out for you. I remember getting a neighborhood person in to do the sub-trunk, and she was fine working through the process, but when I actually locked her in the trunk, she panicked, she banged on the wall, she needed to get out. I got her out as quickly as I could. We found out, she found out for the first time, I found out for the first time that she's terrified of enclosed spaces. So you're going to run into that stuff and you're going to have to work through it. The other thing you want to be very cognizant of is that Grand Illusion is extremely heavy. You're going to carry heavy sound equipment. You're going to carry heavy theatrical equipment, stage settings. You're going to carry lights. And the Grand Illusions themselves, the big boxes themselves, are quite heavy. And they're going to take hours to set up and strike. So, as a mentalist, I very often walk into a theater with carrying a table, a suitcase full of props, and my small sound system. That's it. I can make it in one trip. When you're doing Grand Illusion, forget about one trip. There are going to be many trips. You're going to have to lift heavy stuff up onto a stage, and you're going to have to set it up and then break it down after the show. So you're talking about, half a day to a day to do one show in terms of prep time for that show. Sound equipment, good sound equipment, lights, not just lights to illuminate the stage, but lights to add accent to the presentation that you're doing. Lights that will enhance the mood that you're trying to create with a particular presentation. And set design. You got to give some thought to, what does my stage look like? What do I want to... So you have to think in those terms. In addition, you'll be driving a truck, a large truck that you'll need to load and unload. You also, either you're a good carpenter and you can build some of these props yourself, or you know some good carpenters, or you're going to have to pay top dollar to some of the better illusion builders to get what you want. So going into Grand Illusion is quite expensive. The props, no matter, even if you build them yourself, the props are expensive. In addition to all of that, in my opinion, I'm sure I'm going to get some pushback on this, but in my opinion, Grand Illusion is the most demanding of all types of magic when it comes to theatrical skill. You should study theater. You should study acting. You should study stagecraft. You should understand theater if you're going into Grand Illusion, because it is a theatrical presentation. All magic is theatrical. Mentalism is theatrical. Doing children's entertainment is theatrical. But the demands of holding an audience, the size you'll be playing to when you do Grand Illusion in a full theater, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And you need to prepare for that. So, is it worth it? Is it worth all of that investment? Yes. Yes. After David Copperfield's still performing in Las Vegas. I think Lance Burton has long retired. The Pendragons are no longer performing. But during David Copperfield's height of popularity, you had this magician come along by the name of David Blaine. And David Blaine popularized what he called, or others called, street magic. Well, street magic is really a type of close-up. And so the popularity of magic has shifted from the Grand Illusion to the close-up. But I think it's coming back. I think we're on the verge of a revival in the full stage arts in Grand Illusion. I think that the next Grand Illusionist has yet to take the stage, but I think that he or she will be very soon. I really believe that. I really believe we're ready for the next big star. And Douglas, if that is you, I hope it is. So, let's talk for a second now about some recommendations of how you could get started. Denny Haney really influenced me. Denny Haney did a small Grand Illusion show. He did the canvas-covered trunk. He did a three-sword suspension. He did the multiplying bottles. He did the Owen sword basket. And he said to me, he's the one who gave me the advice that I'm now going to pass on to you, Denny Haney. First, he recommended the Owen sword basket. Owen is the manufacturer. You can get sword baskets from all over the place. You can go on eBay and you can have a basket weaver make you one. You can have a local basket weaver make you one. You can get them from everywhere. I have used homemade sword baskets and I've used the Owen. The Owen is manufactured by a magic manufacturing company, and it really does meet the specs. The Pendragons used an Owen basket. So I recommend it. Is it pricey? You bet it is. The last time I checked, it was in the neighborhood of $7,000. Yes, Grand Illusion's expensive. But you know, I think the Owen is the best. And the sword basket is extremely versatile. You could literally do it surrounded if you needed to. Not that you should, but you could. The second illusion that you should be thinking about is the sub-trunk. Now, Denny did the canvas-covered trunk. I did the standard sub-trunk. I did a crate-style trunk. Mine was made by Chalet Magic. When George Kimmery, I think was his name, when he was making magic for Chalet, he was doing it very inexpensively. So guys like me who loved Grand Illusion but weren't really making their living in it, we could afford really nice props. I bought my sub-trunk from George, and I bought my Zigzag. My Zigzag was custom made to my specs. Chalet Magic made it. I purchased that prop in, I think, 1993. And there's a video down below if you want to take a look at it. There's also a video of me performing the sub-trunk, and I also performed the sword cabinet, which was made by a local carpenter by the name of Mark Steyer. But the sword basket, the sub-trunk, the Zigzag Illusion. Denny used to tell me, look, Dave, if you want to do a big trick, do the zigzag, because even if you don't find an assistant, you could literally train someone in an afternoon to do that trick. You could train a corporate executive to stand in the box and do the trick. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I know when I did the zigzag, I rehearsed with it a lot with Jill. And I built a small platform for her to step on into the box, so it made it a little bit easier for her in the box. So there was some customization that needed to be done. It's an illusion that does require some rehearsal. But the point is well taken. The zigzag is extremely versatile. You can do it anywhere. You can do it surrounded. You can do the sub-trunk surrounded. The broom suspension. Now, Denny opted for the three-sword suspension. I love it. The problem with the three-sword suspension is you need 3 people. 2 people have to lift a person up and put her on the swords. With a broom suspension, you can do it with 2. The broom suspension, of course, was the Robert-Houdin invention. By the way, the sub-trunk, the original sub-trunk, the design for the trunk, was John Nevil Maskelyne, but it was Harry Houdini that created the metamorphosis presentation that we know and love today. Of course, the sword basket is age-old. And then there's another illusion that a lot of illusionists think about. It's very expensive, but I think it's well worth it, and that is the Zany Blainey ladder suspension. As far as I know, there's only one authorized builder in the United States making that illusion. It's quite expensive, but again, it's an extremely versatile prop. So the sword basket, the sub-trunk, the zigzag, the broom suspension, the Blainey ladder suspension, these are the basics. If you're getting into magic, you're just beginning to do magic, you're probably going to learn the cups and balls, you're probably going to learn the linking rings and maybe the egg bag. Well, the illusions that I just named are to Grand Illusion what those illusions are to platform magic. All right, there are some standards. If I was doing card work, I would want to learn an ambitious card or maybe a triumph. These are standard card tricks. I suggest that you learn the basics as you begin your journey in Grand Illusion. By the way, if you want to have a zigzag built, I recommend getting the plans from Paul Osborne, zigzag plans from Paul Osborne, and either making it yourself or having a professional make it for you. There are a number of professional builders that I still work with and still speak to and interact with. And if you need some guidance, I can give you some guidance. But let's get into the books, all right? That's what you asked about. You asked about books. Let's get into the books. The first book I want you to read is this one, Hiding the Elephant by Jim Steinmeyer. The reason I want you to read this is because it gives you a history of Grand Illusion like none I've ever read before. The general theme is this illusion that Houdini presented at the Hippodrome, I think it was in New York, where he made an elephant vanish. But along the road to that particular illusion, Jim Steinmeier gives you the thought process and the great inventors that came along. There's even a history in here of the sawing illusion invented by P.T. Selbit. So this will give you an understanding of where we have come from as Grand Illusionists. I highly recommend that to you. That is Hiding the Elephant. Another book by Jim Steinmeyer, if you can get your hands on it, is Device and Illusion, also by Jim Steinmeyer. And by the way, a lot of these books will give you a sense for how to design illusion and how to construct illusion and give you ideas about illusion, but you may not use specific effects. Now, I know a number of the effects in this book were commercialized, and there are people that are building them commercially. But that's another great book. Another one is Illusion Systems by Paul Osborne. Now, once again, you can get individual plans. This happens to be a book of illusion plans. These are plans that he published in, I believe he published these in Genie, I think, maybe. I'm not sure. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But this particular book is number 647. It's signed by Paul Osborne, dated 8/16/98. I have no idea what the availability of this book is, but I have found it absolutely invaluable. I treasure it. I have a number of Paul Osborne individual illusion plans. I also have his Zigzag plan and a number of others. So I highly recommend that you take a visit to Paul Osborne's website, see what you can get there. Also, this book is called The Great Illusions of Magic. It's a 2-volume set. See here, the Broom Suspension. I just happened to open up to it. What you will find valuable in here is the Brooks trunk. You'll just find a full catalog of magic in here. Grand Illusion. Again, it will stimulate your thought process, get you thinking in the right direction as a Grand Illusionist. Then you've got some little things here that I really enjoyed and want to recommend to you. You've got Topps Treasury of Illusions, 60 illusions. Rand Woodbury was is a cruise line illusionist, and he's got some very clever ideas in here. You've got Genie Illusions. This would be before Paul Osborne. Genie Illusions is pretty good. Then you've got 15 Great Illusions from Abbott's Magic. Now, you've got a couple of interesting books here by a gentleman by the name of Eugene Poinc. Imagination, The Illusions of Eugene Poinc, and Illusions for Princes and Paupers. I will tell you that I have built at least 2 illusions out of this book. So these are some of the books that are available to stimulate your imagination as you pursue your career as a Grand Illusionist. One more book that I must recommend, Illusion Show Know-How by Ken Griffin. Now, I read this book. Now remember, I I saw George Gobel when I was 11 years old do his full illusion show. And I decided at 11 years old, that's what I want to do. So here I am, I'm hanging out at the Phil Thomas Magic Mart. At this point, I'm 12 years old. And I'm telling Phil Thomas, oh, I want to be a grand illusionist, Phil. And so Phil sells me this book and he says, read this book, David. Read this book and decide after you read this book if that's the lifestyle that you want. So I bought this book from Phil. And I remember sitting in, you remember when you were in school, maybe not when you were, but when I was in school, we had at least one session a day, 1 hour a day that was sort of a study session. You didn't have a class scheduled. You went to the library or you went somewhere and you sat and you were supposed to be studying. Well, I was reading this book. I remember sitting in school, reading it, and being in love with everything. So what Ken does here is, and this is very interesting, this is a section on how to design and construct a set, and how to put the set up, and how to take the set down. And I remember reading this and thinking, oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to build my own set. And how and the design in my head and the things I wanted it to look like. But he goes into really the nuts and bolts of doing a traveling illusion show. That, I mean, none of the books that I've recommended have any of that in it. So it is the most practical book, and I still love it. It's one of my favorite magic books of all time. I don't recommend it much. I don't talk about it much because you gotta really love Grand Illusion to love that book. So anyway, hey Douglas, thank you so much for your suggestion. I hope that I wet your whistle a little bit. Questions, comments, please. I love it. Please subscribe if you have not done so already. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time.